I stepped off the plane into the heavy Charleston heat, a welcome contrast to the icy formality of Copenhagen's boardrooms. The contract had closed months of negotiations, revisions, and late-night calls, finally sealed with my signature. I could have stayed for the celebration my colleagues insisted on, but I wanted something else: stillness. My own bed, the tulip garden I planted by hand, a glass of Pinot, and a breeze through open windows. I didn't tell anyone I was coming home early. I wanted it to be quiet. But as the Uber turned onto my street, my chest tightened. Cars lined both curbs, overflowing onto sidewalks and even onto the grass. A cluster of balloons bobbed lazily in the air. Music thumped something nostalgic and loud. The driver glanced at me in the rear view. "Looks like some party," he said, easing to a stop 2 houses down. I forced a nod and climbed out my suitcase, rattling over uneven pavement. The closer I got, the more surreal it became. My house was glowing with light from every window. Laughter spilled out through the open door. A banner fluttered above the porch: Wren Family Reunion 2025. My throat closed. I hadn't received an invitation. No email, no text, not a word. I stepped into the yard. My tulips bent and stomped. The teak chairs I'd salvaged and refinished now ringed in wet cup marks. Cigarette ash dusted the garden path. People I didn't know lounged near the koi pond holding drinks like it was theirs. My heart pounded. This was not a party. It was an invasion. Inside, I had to squeeze past a wall of coats dumped on the banister. The music was louder now, coming from the sound system in the living room. Distant cousins I barely remembered waved like we were lifelong friends. My office door stood ajar. Someone was inside. In the kitchen, my mother, Joyce, stood like a general giving instructions to 2 hired caterers. She wore a soft pink dress. I didn't recognize her hair, freshly styled, her heels clacking against my tile. She turned, finally noticing me. Her mouth tightened. "You weren't supposed to be home until Sunday," she said, voice-flat, eyes scanning behind me as if looking for a solution, not a daughter. I said nothing. Not then. I just looked around one more time and kept walking. I kept moving, afraid that if I stood still for too long, I might start screaming. The hallway was crammed with shoes, handbags, and folding chairs leaning against my antique console. The air was thick heat perfume and fried food. I turned toward the living room where the floorboards I'd personally sanded and sealed were now pulsing beneath the bass line of an old Whitney Houston track. The music was coming from my grandfather's record player, the same one he used to play Coltrane on Sunday afternoons. It now sat exposed on a plastic folding table between paper plates and cans of hard seltzer. Above it, someone had hung streamers. I felt the sting rise in my chest, sharp and sudden. My office door was wide open. That door is always locked, always. Inside, the lamp was on. My laptop was gone from the desk. My blueprints, which had been neatly filed in a drawer, were fanned out across the rug like trash. My leather-bound client book was open pages warped from someone's spilled drink. A half-eaten cupcake sat on a coaster next to an empty wine glass. Down the hall, my bedroom door was propped open with a suitcase. Inside, coats hung from the canopy bed, purses on my reading chair, a toddler's backpack dumped on my duvet. I stood there for a moment, swallowing the taste of iron and disbelief before heading back to the kitchen. Joyce was laughing. Her lipstick was too bright, her wine glass too full. She posed with cousins I hadn't seen in 15 years like a movie star on a set. She saw me and smiled the way someone might at a dog who just tracked in mud. "You're always working. You never come anyway." Mirabelle appeared beside her, cheeks flushed. She adjusted her little hostess apron and added, "You said the house was too big for just one person, so we used it." I nodded once. That's all I had in me. Then I turned and walked out the back door, passing through the garden like a ghost. My tulips were broken stubs. My grandmother's bird bath was filled with beer bottles. I ordered a car and checked into a boutique hotel off King Street. I didn't unpack. I didn't cry. I just lay on the unfamiliar bed, watching the ceiling, my fists curled so tightly the nails bit into my palms. By morning, I knew exactly what I was going to do. That night, in the hotel, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw a stranger holding a drink over Elvira's record player. I saw my coat closet being used for photo props. My thoughts drifted backward because that's where the roots were, where everything began. That house didn't just fall into my lap. I earned it piece by piece in the quiet hours most people ignored. Elvira raised me in that house, not officially. My mother was present in the way storm warnings are loud, scattered, and unpredictable. But my grandmother was constant. While Mirabelle was at cheer practice or sleepovers, I was learning how to regrout tile, how to spot a warped window frame, how to take care of something worth keeping. We planted roses out front the summer I turned 13, pale yellow edged in pink just like the ones in her wedding photos. She let me choose the pattern. I picked a winding arch to match the shape of her silver necklace. When Elvira talked about life, she talked about thresholds, what you let in, what you keep out. The world doesn't need you wide open, she told me once when I was crying over something Mirabelle had said. It needs you strong where it matters and soft only where it's earned. When she passed, the will came with a single note in her familiar script for the one who knows how to care for things and herself. Mirabelle didn't speak to me for 6 weeks. Joyce, in her icy way, called the decision short-sighted. She must have been confused, she said. No one gifts a family home to just one person, but I didn't see it as a gift. It was a charge, a promise. I poured everything I had into that house, restored its plaster, polished its oak, replanted every inch of the garden using Elvira's original notebook. I even kept the tulip pattern exactly as she sketched it, a bird in flight, only visible from the second-story window. And now they'd trampled it. As if none of it meant anything, as if none of it had ever mattered at all. Looking back, I can't say I was surprised. Not really. The signs had always been there, small trespasses dressed up as affection boundary crossings disguised as closeness. Mirabelle never asked. She just took. My sweaters, my books, a set of vintage china I'd inherited from Elvira, gone from the cabinet one Thanksgiving, reappearing weeks later, chipped and unwashed in her trunk. Joyce would shrug it off with the same line every time. She's just expressive. Expressive became careless. Careless became invasive. After my divorce, they both showed up at the house, boxes in hand. Mirabelle said she needed a fresh start. Joyce claimed I shouldn't be alone. I didn't argue. I was too raw, too tired to do anything but nod. For weeks, they stayed filling my kitchen with noise, my closets with their clutter, and my calendar with guilt. What started as a temporary arrangement bled into permanence. They rearranged furniture, added floral throw pillows, swapped out my clean modern lighting for ornate brass fixtures they found at a yard sale. When I changed it back, Mirabelle rolled her eyes. Wow, another Danish lamp must be nice to be that boring. Joyce laughed. She likes things cold. Always has. I kept working. Long hours, late nights. Travel became an escape I didn't have to justify. If I was away, they couldn't touch anything new. I told myself they meant well, that I was being sensitive, that family just behaved like this. But it wasn't love. Not the kind Elvira taught me. It was entitlement cloaked in familiarity. Now standing in the wreckage of my garden, listening to music pound through the walls of a house I no longer recognized, I saw the truth. They weren't careless. They were consistent. This reunion wasn't a mistake. It was an assumption that my space was theirs, that my silence was permission, that they could keep taking because I kept letting them. Not this time. Not anymore. I didn't go back to the house that day. I needed the night to sharpen the edge between impulse and clarity. I didn't want anger driving this. I wanted precision. On the hotel balcony before sunrise, I called Marco Chen. He answered on the second ring chipper, even at that hour. "Ms. Wren," he said, "have you reconsidered our last conversation?" I have, I said. Is the buyer still interested? There was a brief silence, then a rustle of papers. Dominic Vance. Absolutely. Still cash, still no contingencies, and very motivated. Wants to close within a month. Make it happen, I said. As soon as you can. By 7, I was outside the house again. The party had thinned out sometime in the night, but the evidence remained like an oil slick. Empty cans in the flower beds, a trail of glitter across the porch steps. Inside, it smelled like cheap perfume, old shrimp, and spilled beer. I walked room to room, snapping photos. In the dining room, my heirloom credenza, the one Elvira used to polish every Sunday, was ringed with white burns from hot trays. Her sewing table, the delicate one with the carved legs, was now stained with soy sauce and red wine. Plastic utensils and paper napkins still littered its surface. I walked out to the garden last. The tulips were ruined, trampled flat into the soil like weeds. I stood there for a long time, the early morning sun brushing across broken petals and bent stems. It should have made me cry. It didn't. I felt something settle instead, something resolute. I whispered to the air, to the silence, to Elvira maybe. You built this with care, and I'll protect it by letting it go. Later that day, I met Marco at his office. I signed the documents. The ink was still drying when he listed the property. The family didn't notice for 2 days, not until Joyce pulled up and saw the for sale sign hammered into the front lawn. Not until Mirabelle texted just 3 words. What is this? I didn't reply. I didn't need to. They came to the house the next morning. I saw their car before they rang the bell, Joyce's silver sedan jerking into the driveway like it had something to prove. I was upstairs boxing up the few things I still wanted to keep: Elvira's pocket watch, my drafting pencils, the last journal she gave me. Joyce didn't knock. She walked straight in like it was still hers, heels clicking with purpose. You're tearing apart this family, she said before I even reached the landing. I met her at the foot of the stairs. Mirabelle was close behind, eyes wide with disbelief, but already rehearsing her next performance. She stepped forward like I was the one who needed consoling. We could have made this work, she said. You're acting like a stranger. I didn't yell. I didn't even flinch. I just looked at them and said I didn't sell out of anger. I sold because it stopped feeling like mine the day you invited the world in without me. Joyce scoffed. Don't be dramatic. It was a party. It was an invasion, I said. Into my home, my privacy, my peace. That matters. Mirabelle folded her arms. So you're punishing us. I reached into my bag and pulled out Diane's business card, my attorney. I held it out. If you have legal concerns, you can send them there. Joyce didn't take it. She stared at the card like it was a weapon, like it burned. Mirabelle just blinked. By noon, they were gone. I thought that might be the end of it. But a few hours later, I got a text from Mirabelle's husband. Tell the truth. This isn't about the house. It's about control. You always wanted to be the one holding the keys. I stared at it for a moment, then blocked the number. I didn't respond because there was nothing left to say. They had tried anger, guilt, nostalgia. Now they were trying shame. But guilt only works when you still believe you owe someone. I went back to packing the hallway bookshelf. The last item was a framed photo of Elvira and me on the porch, smiling, quiet, whole. I wrapped it in cloth and slid it gently into the box. The apartment was smaller than anything I'd lived in since college, tucked behind a seafood market near the harbor. It had low ceilings and scuffed tile floors, but the light came in soft in the morning and didn't need permission to be there. I moved in with 6 boxes, mostly clothes, my houseplants, and the rolled-up blueprints from my last project. No heirlooms, no antique tables, no echo of footsteps that weren't mine. I didn't tell anyone the address, not Joyce, not Mirabelle, not even Riva at first. My phone buzzed for days, blocked numbers, cousins from God knows where, asking how I could betray the family shame, my grandmother sell our legacy, like it was a bad stock. I ignored all of it, except for one message. It came from Riva. We hadn't spoken in years, but she'd always seen things others didn't dare say aloud. They did the same to my mother, she wrote. Different house, same erasure. You did what we all wish we had. You chose peace. I hope it holds. I read her words 3 times before saving them in a locked note. Not because I needed validation, but because I needed to remember I wasn't crazy for refusing to be used. The silence in the apartment felt different. Not lonely, spacious. I started designing again. Nothing fancy, just little side projects, drafts of sunrooms and kitchen extensions, tiny spaces that wanted to be lived in, not performed for. The work came easier without the house pressing down on me. Then one evening, an email arrived from Dominic Vance. Ms. Wren, I thought you'd want to know while clearing the attic we found an old ledger. Your grandmother's, I think. Her handwriting is beautiful. Detailed notes on the garden, even the pantry dimensions. We're restoring it. Gently. I just wanted you to know we'll treat this house like it deserves. I read it twice, then a 3rd time. Then I let the phone rest on my chest and closed my eyes, the weight in my chest, lifting not from joy, but from release. I stood and opened the window, letting the salt air blow across my face. It was a Thursday evening just after 7. Rain tapped the kitchen window while pasta simmered on the stove. I'd been experimenting with a lemon cream sauce I found in Elvira's recipe notebook, the pages smudged and still smelling faintly of cinnamon. The rhythm of cooking, the sound of boiling water, the scent of garlic. These were the small things I had reclaimed. Then the knock came. Not tentative, loud, urgent. I froze for a beat, wiped my hands on a towel, and opened the door. Mirabelle stood on the other side, soaked through. Her mascara was streaked hair plastered to her cheeks. She didn't look angry. She looked desperate, which somehow felt worse. Behind her, holding a broken umbrella, was Joyce. You weren't answering your phone, Mirabelle said quickly, voice too loud for the hallway. We didn't know where else to go. What happened? I asked, though I already had a feeling. We were staying at the house, she said. Just temporarily, just to transition while figuring things out. But the new owner, Dominic, whatever he changed the locks, said we were trespassing. He owns the house, I said. That's what buyers do. We just need a little help. She continued, voice thinning. First month's rent, maybe a deposit, a few thousand, just enough to get settled. Joyce stepped forward, her voice brittle but rehearsed. We're family Isolde. You can't leave us out here. I held the door but didn't move. The smell of lemons and rain hung between us. I didn't leave you, I said, not raising my voice. You were never with me. Joyce blinked. Mirabelle swallowed hard. I stepped inside, retrieved the folder I'd prepared days ago, the one with affordable housing leads, job programs, counseling, resources. I held it out. No money, I said, but help if you want it. Real help. Neither reached for the folder. The hallway felt smaller, time slower. Mirabelle shook her head. So that's it. After everything I didn't answer, I just laid the folder on the entry table beside them and gently closed the door. Mirabelle didn't speak when I closed the door. I heard her scoff. Then her footsteps retreating down the hallway fast and uneven, like she couldn't decide whether to run or storm. Joyce lingered. I could feel her through the door, her presence pressing against the wood like fog. A muffled voice came through, flat and sharp. This is punishment. I opened the door, halfway met her eyes. No, I said. It's clarity. She didn't argue, just stared a moment longer, then turned and followed her daughter into the rain. That night, I lit a single candle in the windowsill. Elvira used to do that when a hard decision had to be made. Light helps you sit with what's right, she'd say. I watched the flame flutter, listened to the wind scratch at the glass. I didn't cry. I didn't feel triumphant. I simply felt steady. For the first time in years, I slept through the night without waking. No twisting dreams, no noise behind my ribs. A week passed. The apartment began to feel more like mine spices, arranged shoes by the door, one plant beginning to bloom again after nearly dying in the move. I answered emails, took new design inquiries, kept my routines clean and small. Then Dominic reached out. His message was short. Thought you'd want to see this. Attached were 4 photos. The garden. My old garden, not flattened or scrubbed into something soulless, restored. The tulips bloomed again, yellow with pink edges, laid out in Elvira's pattern, and ascending bird wings extended in full flight, visible from above. Dominic wrote, "There's love here still. You just had to set it free." I stared at the images for a long time, not with longing, with stillness. What I'd protected hadn't been a house. It had been a promise, and someone else had picked it up gently and kept it going. I left the message unanswered, but not unappreciated. Then I stood, made tea, and stepped out onto the balcony. The air smelled like salt and spring. I had 1 box left to unpack. Just 1. Spring turned to summer, then fall. The rhythm of my life changed, and for once I didn't resist it. I took on fewer clients, but more meaningful ones. I started mentoring 2 young designers, bright, anxious, full of raw vision and self-doubt. I recognized versions of myself in them and gave what I could. Not just notes on their layouts, but space, encouragement, boundaries. I started therapy. Not because I felt broken, but because I wanted to stop repeating old patterns in new rooms. Talking out loud made things sharper, simpler, not softer, just real. One crisp afternoon, I walked by the old house. Just once. I didn't dress for nostalgia. I was cutting through the neighborhood and turned a corner, and there it was. It looked different, lighter. The colors were truer somehow, like the house had been washed clean of old shadows. Dominic had painted the trim a soft dove gray, just like the original. The garden was blooming, not manicured, but alive. Near the front gate, a small bronze plaque caught the light. Restored with care, in honor of those who built with love. No names, just the truth. I didn't go in. I didn't linger. I stood for a moment and then walked on, letting the sound of the wind through the tulip leaves follow me down the street. That evening, I unpacked the last box. It had waited in the corner for months, inside Elvira's sketchbook, thick with folds, smudged with charcoal and old garden dirt. Tucked between 2 pages was a note I'd never seen before, written in the margin, her handwriting slanted but steady. "One day you'll have to choose between peace and pleasing others. Choose peace always." I read it twice. Then I framed it and placed it above my new drafting table, not as a decoration, as a reminder, as a kind of inheritance, something not built from wood or walls, but from the quiet courage to begin again.